Hi, and welcome to our second installment of the Link Bible Institute's World Religions Spring Semester Class Online. We're going to do a three-part video today on Islam. Again, it's a shortened version of our in-class sessions on world religions that are going on every Tuesday from 7 to 9 p.m. at San Pedro Lutheran Church in downtown Houston. And you're more than welcome to join us at those classes if you'd like, but I'm glad that you're here enjoying the classes online as well. Now, as we look at this today, we're going to shorten it to just 30 minutes. It's a lot to cover in 30 minutes. In our textbook, God is Not One by Stephen Prothero, he ranks Islam as the greatest religion in terms of impact on contemporary culture throughout the world, in terms of growing numbers, and just in terms of sheer numbers as well. So it's a religion that people are paying attention to, that people are talking about, and that has great impact in our world today. So it's hard to cover it in 30 minutes. I hope this is a sufficient introduction. I do believe it will be. Now, as we said, the nice part is that you're taking this online. The poor students in the class had to take a quiz on the readings tonight, so they're in for a quiz. But as we go through, I'll be quizzing you a little bit on your knowledge of Islam along the way. Now, as I mentioned, Islam is a religion that is in the news. A few contemporary headlines that feature information about Islam. Just here recently in the United States, we had congressional hearings by Representative King on Islamic extremism here in the United States. I passed out an article in class from the New York Times called Domestic Terrorism Hearing Opens with Contrasting Views on Dangers. You know, there's this partisan divide, there's a philosophical divide. Is Islam a religion of peace? Is it a religion of war? Are there so-called moderate Muslims and then extreme Muslims? Are the extreme Muslims louder? Are the moderate Muslims louder? Are the moderate Muslims silent? There was a Muslim who said that extreme Islam is a cancer eating away at the core of Islam, something we need to address. And then there were other Muslims saying there's no such thing as moderate extreme Islam. All true Muslims are moderate Muslims, and so on and so forth. So something we're talking about here in the U.S., something that got a lot of press coverage as well. Something that's getting a lot of press coverage in Europe is the recent so-called burqa ban in France, and something also being considered in other European nations. This is a ban on women in France wearing the burqa or the hijab in Europe in public. Just in France, really, actually, not just in all of Europe. But they're not allowed, according to French law now, to wear the burqa or the hijab in public places. They face a fine. There's been an outcry about this from Muslim women in France. There's been burqa protests, and there's even been some detentions and some arrests so far. This is something that just came out last week. Whereas you've got other conservative individuals in England and here in the United States praising French President Sarkozy, or Sarkozy en français, and his compatriots in the French Parliament for enacting this law. And so there's a divide there as well. Now, also in the news are the various revolutions going on across the Middle East and North Africa. Some people say, well, this is purely a secular revolution. But I passed out an article on this from Sightings at the University of Chicago. They had an interesting article entitled Secular Revolutions, Religious Landscapes. Very interesting article saying that while they might appear to be entirely secular, these Middle Eastern and North African revolutions feature prayers, feature religious language, feature quotes in the Quran. You know, even though the religion of Islam is not the driving force behind the revolutions, religious leaders continue to defend, protest, and speeches that are disseminated on YouTube. There's stuff up on Twitter and Facebook that has religious overtones. And so, you know, the religion is kind of encouraging the revolution, even though it's not the basis of the revolution. So, to say the least, Islam is in the news. Now, separate from what we get from Islam in the news, Prothero posits that most Europeans and North Americans have never met a Muslim. So for them, Islam begins in the imagination. Now, of course, you may be an exception to this rule, or you may not be. So I ask you, have you ever met a Muslim? And if so, what did you learn from that Muslim or Muslims that you have met? If you've never met a Muslim, then what do you understand about Islam? If you've never met a Muslim or you've never had a direct experience with Islam, then it's not a bad thing to say that what Islam is to you is in your imagination. It's just the same as your thoughts about a country that you've wanted to visit. That may be in your imagination. Now, when you visit that place, it may seem very like what you imagined, or it may not seem like what you imagined. So it can be a good thing, it can be a bad thing, it could be an accurate thing, your imagination can be right, or it could be wrong. And so we want to discuss some of those things. We want to maybe confront the wrong things in people's imaginations about Islam, and then also confirm some of the things in people's imaginations about Islam. I ask you to just think this. What does Islam conjure up in your mind? Okay? What do you think when you hear the word Islam? What are the pictures that you get in your mind? What are the words that come to mind? What are the people that come to mind? Who are the people that come to mind? Take a moment to think about that. Formulate that in your mind as we continue on learning about Islam. And maybe jot a couple things down saying, well, this is what I think Islam is about. This is what I think Muslims do. These are the people that I think about when I think about Islam. Okay, that's your mind, but think about also the minds of your community. What do people in your community think about Islam? What do people in your city think about Islam? What do people in your state or your country think about Islam from your culture? Anyway, we've got a multicultural class that meets on Tuesday nights, and I know many of our listeners come from various backgrounds, whether they be Anglo or Hispanic or Asian or African. We've got a lot of different cultural perceptions of what Islam is and a lot of different cultural interactions with Islam. So what does your culture think? What does your community think? What do you think about Islam? Take a few seconds to maybe write that down. Now, the first thing we need to understand about Islam is the word Islam. Islam means submission. It means to submit. And Muslims are the submitters who seek peace in this life and the next by surrendering to the one true God, Allah, as revealed by the Prophet Muhammad. That's the essence of Islam. If you were to sum Islam up in one sentence, this would be the sentence. And this is something pulled from Prothero. This is something that a lot of religious commentators would agree upon. This is what defines Islam. It means submission and submitting to Allah. As we mentioned last time in our introduction, we will be studying each religion according to each religion's unique set of answers to these questions. What's the problem that all humanity faces? What's the solution? How do we get there? What's the technique? And who are the different people who are exemplars of this technique solution to a certain problem that they define. Now, in Islam, the problem is self-sufficiency. The solution is a soul at peace, and the technique is submission to Allah, and the greatest exemplar is Muhammad. Okay, so Islam says the problem is self-sufficiency. They don't believe in original sin. Know that. A lot of people in Christian circles believe in original sin, that all humans are born with the propensity to do wrong, and also a history of doing wrong that's kind of passed on via our family. In Islam, we are born with the propensity to do either good or evil. Now, most often we choose the evil of relying upon ourselves. Okay, everyone is born with the opportunity to submit to Allah, and that's that is our natural inclination, is to submit to Allah. But we get fooled in this world into self-sufficiency, relying solely on ourselves. Now, this leads to turmoil and chaos and pain and evil and suffering. So the solution to all this pain, evil, chaos, and suffering is to get rid of the idol of self-sufficiency and become a soul at peace, both in this life and even more so in the next, in paradise. Okay? And how you do this, the technique